All right, welcome everybody. We got a good one for you here today. We're going to title this one Cog is the New Sheeple, and this is CogNation. Basically, in a nutshell, we're going to talk about percentages today, statistics. We have National Security Agency former biostatistics and algorithms expert Kevin here. So we are going to use his resource to just kind of figure out, like, hey, this channel is a little bit different than other channels, and how do we spread the message? Do we want to spread the message? What's the most effective way to do it, type of thing? What are the stats that we're actually dealing with here? We're going to talk a bit about that. We're going to touch on religion as always. We're going to touch on some methodology things. We are going to touch on marketing methodology. We're going to touch a bit about around the world stuff. We're going to talk some about Christ consciousness. We're going to talk a little bit about the company Boeing. And then we're going to tie a bow on it with the idea of critical mass theory. So, with that, honestly, we were just kind of bullshitting here, and I just feel like bullshitting today. I do not feel like actually having to present information, but as I was just saying, duty calls. So we shall run through this for everyone, and the kind of purpose here is, for anybody who's ever seen me in chat rooms might already start to have developed a certain perception of me. And I want to premise all this with saying you still don't know, like, who I actually am. What I'm doing in chat rooms is something different than going out and representing, one, myself, and two, the book I wrote, and three, Big Brain University, what we're doing here. It's not quite like that, and I don't want to sit here and explain, my process and, the reasons that I'm doing that, because that's a whole conversation about learning about sociology and people's cognitive behavior patterns. I've been doing that for a long time, so if you've ever seen me in chat rooms and just nonverbal communication, you're not really getting, like, here's this guy out to saying his opinions and shit like that. One, I don't really operate on opinions and stuff like that anyway. It's just kind of a different mentality that we work with around here. But that's also another story. But I wanted to, again, premise kind of the purpose of this, and by starting with, just because you've seen me say some things in chat, don't think that I'm attached to that information, because you can just present information to people without being attached to it in any certain way, just to learn about what they're going to say about it for whatever other reason you might want to get. One place I learned about doing that was in formal education with cybersecurity, and how does a hacker hack a system. Well, what fascinated me about the cybersecurity I was learning was the human aspect of it, where you can just trick the people into letting you in to the system. Instead of trying to spend your time hacking the Gibson, you just trick the person at the front desk into giving you their password, right? So I first learned about, that technique of, just making people think a certain thing for a minute, like, oh, this is a email saying you need to reset your password because we had a security breach and blah, blah, blah. You scare them into putting their password into a screen and reset it, right? But really it was just a fake email that looked official. So you can run with that idea as far as you want, but that's kind of what I'm talking about here. So again, I just wanted to say, don't assume that you know who I am or what I'm doing, or have really any insight into my personal process and stuff like that, just because you've seen some words on a screen. Because what this kind of all leads into is I have a book that I wrote and I didn't write it with intention of I'm going to go and try to get as many people to read it as possible or sell it to as many people as possible. That wasn't really the purpose of me writing it. Me writing it was so I didn't have to sit here and retell the story to somebody and be like, all right, so you got like 3 to 6 hours that I can sit here and just like boom, 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 run you through this entire fucking thing, where it was like all of these details mattered because I was in a state of mind where it was like I was seeking something in particular, and I was doing it in a way that it was like, I was like, universe, I'm drawing my line with you. Like, God out there, whatever is going on, I'm drawing my line. Like, we're going to figure this out. Like, we're going to help me help you. We're going to figure this out. Or I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do with this whole, like, God thing, because at that point, if I'm not getting any answers, I'm gonna have to kind of determine that there's nothing really there. So I just wrote this story down so I didn't have to retell it to people, because I experienced such things that are just so hard to retell in a moment. So again, I wrote it down. And one thing I come across, people, because I like to get out there and talk, and I like to study behavior and belief systems and this and that, and I like to research them myself. So a lot of times the conversation comes up like, well, okay, Mr. Screen name, what do you believe? Like, tell us about what you believe and what's your foundation and this and that. And I'm like, man, I can't put it to you simply, but I wrote this book for you. And it's like, a lot of times in chat rooms, like, and in those situations, people will think you're just trying to sell something. So the reason you're there now is that you're presenting this information, and then all of a sudden they start to judge you for how you're presenting the information or the other things that you're saying about other subject. And it's like, what made you all assume that I was here for any purpose in the first place? It's kind of just an odd phenomena that people just start to develop these assumptions right away about people, and they think that people are portraying their true selves out on chat rooms and stuff. And it's like, this is nonverbal communication, you guys. It's never really meant to be taken as like that person's true self or something like that. It's like words can just be taken so differently. Like, if I say something, you probably didn't know exactly what I meant. Like, hopefully you have a really good idea, but you still translated it in your own way. That's part of your own thought process. So what you'll see is a lot of, they'll just, oh, well, I'm not going to read that book because I'm deeming that person doesn't know what they're talking about because they said XYZ, or they called this person a retard. And it's like, it's an interesting phenomena. So over the years, I've learned from so many conversations, like, that there's really a statistical element to this, that you could say about 15 to 20%. I was talking to a person the other day about it, to the Reverend Kyle, and then I came over to Kev's here, and Kev and I are doing this Big Brain University thing in the Buff Brain Sportscast. So we could also add that to the layer here of like, well, how do we want to market this part of it? Like, do I want to sit here and, go out and just war drive and be like, hey guys, come listen to this and this and that. And then what are our percentages going to be? Like, what's our target audience? Like, what people are even going to connect with this type of information? Because it's not your typical, like, we're going to sit here and entertain you with fancy shit and all the latest, like, editing and crap like that. We're just here having intellectual conversation because that's what we want to see in the world, basically. I don't want to put, like, a reasoning behind that, but the more people out there having intellectual conversations instead of sitting around talking about fantasy sports and shit like that, or fucking Taylor Swift albums, or whatever the bullshit on the block is right now, the better off the world's going to be. So trying to raise like some awareness level, like get on a certain level of existing with each other here, so we're not so dumbed down and unaware of what's going on around us. So to kind of move forward here, without lingering too long on this kind of introduction about why we're doing this particular recording today, we also want to open the floor for people's feedback as to like for marketing ideas. Like, but here's some things to keep in mind. Like, we don't really have like a goal where we're like, we want to reach all the people we can. That's not really it, because of the statistical reasons and stuff we'll get into. But what I mean by all that is like, what do you guys think about like, how would you spread the message? 2, what do you think the target audience is? 3, should we even be spreading the message? Like, maybe it's not even really a fruitful thing to do. Like, maybe you all just think like, hey, you're just wasting your time, you guys. Like, there's no reason to do it. Maybe, think about that. And then we're gonna color in some more things behind that idea here. So I think that in a quick nutshell is what we're going to talk about today. I think I'm finished with my premise. I'm going to let Kev here talk about their training, what the intelligence community trains their personnel to expect statistic wise. Yeah, perfect. I think before he does that, he has a disclaimer as always. Thanks everybody for joining. That's all I have to say for the moment.
For sure. I do not speak for the Department of Defense, nor do I speak for any government agency. I only speak for myself. Nothing I say on these podcasts, verbal and or written comments, the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the government. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. Do you understand that we will only discuss what we talk about? That's a question. And then, like the polygraph, they ask at the very end, do you understand that I will only ask you the questions that we have discussed? And then you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know what that means.
Well,
yeah.
It smells like pea soup.
So with that, that's that. So perception versus perspective is exactly what you were talking about earlier about people think you say one thing and then they perceive it as another and then other, like that's an easy example, especially away from human interaction, because on a keyboard or in the cyber world, it's a whole nother parallel. But with that, as far as you were saying about the people who are the vulnerables, they'll the password or the McAfee virus is you got to click here, and then next thing you know, bam, they're in a situation where they don't even know what's going on. But I have to say, with the sexpionage and the pig butchering out there, that people really need to be aware of what they're doing. And even the smartest of the 20% of the cogs, they sometimes think they're too smart. Even the 1%, some of the 1%, there's always just, when it comes to
Cogs, you say?
the cogs, yeah.
So what are the cogs?
But I was going to just say that everybody needs to be acknowledged and be careful out there in the world of, it sounds too good to be true, especially with everything going on. So, yeah, you can protect yourself all you want, but if you don't think differently, that's where people are like, damn, I didn't know how that worked.
Yeah, thinking differently will start to provide you the idea of security in layers. Thinking differently means, okay, I've thought of all this, now am I missing something? Always, like running a script, basically. It's just like always running a script that keeps running a system of self-checks, and you can keep adding things to your script to check for. So it's like a good way to describe the what's in place of the belief mentality is like this sort of script running, where it's like you're always running this script of skepticism and always questioning things, never really like letting it be, because once you're letting it be, that state is replaced by adding perspective, re-examining, what am I missing here? Can I go and gather more information to add things to the script? So you're always information processing, and it's this state of learning. That's what learning is, people. When you build beliefs and things like that, and you're not staying aware, like Kevin's saying, you're not self-assessing and adding perspective, you get kind of complacent. And I'm not sure if that's the most perfect word, but a little passive, a little lazy-minded, and you stop running scripts, which means can result in your guard being let down, a surface area for your risks growing, an attack surface, instead of being mitigated and lessened. So always having a small attack surface and always running more perspective to how to mitigate risks, searching for new risks, because new shit comes up all the time. People think of new ways to hurt people and extort people all the time. So it's like we can't just rest on, well, we believe that people tell us when we're supposed to, the television will tell us when we're supposed to be worried about something. We need to have a more active.
You got the 80% and the 20%, 80%.
80% waiting for the television, 20% telling you that the television's full of shit.
And then the 1% that are sitting there laughing. They're not laughing, but saying, hey, we told y'all, be aware. Be aware.
Be aware.
You can only spread so much, whatever. It depends on what they're watching, too. That's the other thing.
So, what? You said something earlier, the cog. What is the cog? The idea of the cog.
The cog is, it's a term for sheeple. Term for sheep, term for crab in a bucket, term for fly on the window when you got a wide open door and the fly dies.
I like it.
The cog is also goes into a parallel of society that, man, they just kind of don't want to change things. They want things kind of set, but they don't like the fact that there's no privacy in this world. But they want to give. See what I mean? They want to the cogs. Those are the sheeple.
Those are the sheeple.
Those are the people that.
See, I like that word because when I think of this whole system, it's like it's a system, a multifaceted system that's self-perpetuated. So it's like each individual is sort of like a cog in the machine. Because when we say sheeple, it's a little condescending. It kind of sets the tone for a little bit of.
It's almost offensive if I say it.
Yeah.
If I told somebody, bro, you're a fucking sheep.
People are offended by anything these days, though.
And I saw that they would be like, that's a very derogatory term. I'm like, well, you are a fucking sheep. And they're like,
I'm offended by that. It becomes standoffish, right? Yeah.
But the cog becomes they don't know what that word is. So,
yeah, right. So then it becomes they become inquisitive.
Yeah, right.
They become curious.
They become cognitively beware in the cog world, which are cognitive behavior. It does not reflect what they think it is. So that's where I say I always say the cogs. The cogs back in the States are all worried about this, and we're over here fucking doing this.
Yeah.
The cogs over there. The cogs over there. The cogs. The cogs, and
the cogs.
That's the word that we are going to.
That's where we're up
from now on.
That's what we're going to put out there.
We didn't want to embarrass the real sheep in the world, so I'm going to just use cog. And I'm not talking about sheep in the world. I'm talking about sheep in this freedom country of random to roam wherever they want. That's disrespectful to them. So I'm going to say to the real sheep out there that are doing their thing, getting fleeced,
Eating grass.
living life, not getting slaughtered. Yeah, the cogs are
And hey,
replacing that.
Cheers to the ones that are. They're probably tasty and nutritious.
They get sent over to seas, over to France, and they're just into the other part of the.
They're a noble creature, so
yep.
it's not
very
exactly
delicate,
like
very
real
delicate over
sheeple.
in other countries. Very delicate, very.
Yeah.
So if you can get a couple sheep and fly them over, and you could probably get a lot of money for them just for the wool and what they offer. It's in other countries is stuff that we wouldn't even think of.
They make so much different stuff with them. A bunch of goods,
the
products,
food process, like the stuff that's it's. I just was like, wow, that's
interesting.
They're like, yeah, that's. I'm like, man, that's kind of unique that they eat that over there. And,
yeah. The food will tell you a lot about a certain place and kind of the.
So if I told somebody overseas what a sheep, they'd be like, oh, that's a really delicacy thing. Like that would be like power. Like you can get me some sheep. That's where I didn't want to start embarrassing the asset valuability of.
Oh, okay,
sheep.
we didn't want to confuse
The
things.
cogs are the ones that are sitting there.
Yeah,
doing
the sheep have value. We're not so sure about a lot of the cogs.
No, they have value.
No,
it's just
we don't also want to be condescending to the cogs, but because a lot of the cogs out there, I have a cog role too. I have a job that is in this cog economy, this CogNation that makes this go around. So, the mechanics and everything, everybody's little job that helps make that people get through their day, and makes things happen. We mean no disrespect to any of that. But what we're speaking to is a matter of, an evolution of thought that we need to get people more educated about the things that we didn't get educated on in school. I think that might be the most simple and humble and honest way I can put it, is that we're all in this same situation where we got dealt a little bit of a stacked deck of cards, and that cards was stacked against us, and we weren't all quite aware of it, but the fucking dealers might not really even have been aware of it. But whoever put those friggin' cards in the deck, somebody was aware of it, and they're reaping the benefits of it. We're not really going to go into that whole situation, but I just wanted to point out that, look, we're all in on this together, pretty much, and we all have to experience the collective suffering, which means we all sort of get to experience the collective successes, and we want to bring that together a bit more with just more proper education again on the things that we didn't get educated on in school.
Yeah,
the things that they can't even buy.
I was a cog in that whole pyramid of whatever that was up to 18, 19. I was in that. I understood where if I kept on that path, I'm going to be down the same road as all this until I got intercepted. And that's the key. When people are in that and they know when they are thinking differently and can shift their mindset and be like, yeah, I can use this differently to apply a different way of thinking, that's where I respect that, because if people just want to continue in this mundane, hope for whatever, wake up when they're 60 or whatever, be like, I missed out on everything. Well, you weren't missed out. You just kind of were in the system where
sleepwalking a little bit.
You were just I don't know,
just kind of missing it. Not as aware as you could have been. Added perspective goes a long ways because you notice more things.
But it takes an interception or something to people to want to, or
to tune them in. I wanted to speak on that because Kev and I have both I started this whole thing with, I wrote this book. I kind of got intercepted in a way. I just got intercepted, taught away, shown a different way of thinking, and I was like, okay, all right, that makes sense, let's go. And then Kev, I meet him later on in life, and he's like describing to me the same thing when he got intercepted by the NSA, and they're like, all right, forget everything you think you know. We're gonna teach you a different way of thinking.
It was just a government way of thinking also.
Yeah.
But it shifted in parallel.
Yeah.
And that's definitely.
And that's what I found so interesting about it, because it was super parallel to what everything that I had to the methodology and thought that I was thinking about. And then from when I was thinking about that, when I was writing the book, I then went and got a formal education where I studied information security, which is what Kev was also taught. So it was like we have just both this parallel between both of our ways of getting intercepted, that it's just so interesting how it connects. And it's like, okay, very, very interesting, very, very interesting to note. So that's what we're trying to also relay and provide here, is it's like we've both had some fairly interesting situations where it's like you can't go buy the education that him and I had where we got intercepted. Like, you can go get the information security degrees I got, yeah, but you're gonna have to go do something different if you're gonna try to write a book like that, or go do something similar to what I wrote about in the book, is what I was trying to say there. Or you're gonna have to take a particular path to where you're going to be able to get intercepted by an intelligence agency if you want to experience that. So it's like we're kind of giving you a shortcut here, and to add perspective for y'all. So with that, I came and asked you, and I was like, well, what's our actual percentage here that we're dealing with? Like, if we go into chat room or some sort of scenario where it's like we're just trying to spread the message, what can we expect to see? And he said, well, the so-and-so, go ahead and tell him what you told me about the 80-20.
All right, so...
Because this is what we mean by 80-20, and not exactly that like 20% of people are above the 80%. We're just saying this is also like a schema thing. So sorry, not to interrupt there. Just wanted to add to that so people understand.
And to also say, a lot of people would relate that you can go to college and get a degree and do whatever they do. Unfortunately, you can't just go to college and be like, hey, if I said, here, you can't go get a degree. The only thing you could do to be ahead of ever wanting to be intercepted in a very quick fashion with algorithms, especially these days, learn a foreign language, figure out which one is important. Don't just be like, well, I'm going to learn whatever, and like, well, that language is irrelevant. And get you way through a top secret SCI type clearance. Just start with a baseline and go your avenue that way. Because you're not going to go to college and be like, here's what I want to do. Nobody really understands what's really available until you come across it, right? Like the way that we're offered with opportunities. A lot of it's the stagnant way. But anyway, 80-20. The 80-20, so that's 100%. 80% is based off a foundation of normalcy, fitting in, and this goes in all aspects: education, job-wise. What's another one?
You had a story about the Navy SEALs, where basically to get into the Navy SEALs, they were kind of like, if we got 100 guys here, we got a pretty rough idea that only 20 of them are going to make it.
Yeah.
Like, because this type of stuff is really only for about 20% of those guys.
Thank you for that, because that's exactly where I was trying to formulate how people could relate. So yes, that is an example. 100 people show up, and with the intentions of, I'm going to give it my best, and I'm going to not quit. I'm not going to back down. I'm going to check the boxes, and be told what is the job or whatever we're supposed to be doing in the training. And you know what? Yeah, there's only going to be 20%. No matter how good you are, you're going to fall in that 80 percentile. It's just a matter of the games, matter of the math, the matter of that you could be physically capable. Your mental might be, you might be in a better role than that. But it's all narrowed down to a 20 percentile, and it's just a process of elimination. And even look at the education system. 80% of all the students that would qualify on the what I would say a B minus and above, like that smart, educated, structured, taught, normalcy, whatever. And that's the 80%. Then you got the 20% down that are they just didn't want to do it. They wanted to do their own thing. They want to go on a different path. They don't know what they want to do. Same thing with the SEALs. It was just you had two parallel. Who wanted it more?
Yeah.
But the Navy SEAL was a tier 1 elite level training. That's how the platform is 20%.
Yeah.
And if that's elite level training, that's like the 100 of the greatest. I mean, they're programmed in a way of that. So even if they make it out of that, they still have something to fall back on in a elite level. But they are just going to either use it in another way, but it's not going to be the elite way to go on and figure out what's going on behind the closed doors and figure out what's going on over there, and given the responsibility to really do some cool shit. That's where I got that foundation of 80-20. It was no different in language schools. It's, you get weeded out. A lot of that stuff is incorporated with even mundane life. Like look at a corporation, 80% or like Amazon. I mean, it's like whatever they are, whatever. Yeah. But that's a corporate type of example. But
well, it's a really interesting methodology because, like I said, I have done a lot of talking to people and a lot of like cognitive behavior observation, and man, it is like 15% of people out there, like fucking 10 out of 100, dude. 15 out of 100. I can approach them in any way. It seems like I can approach them as like super kind. I can approach them somewhere in between, or I can approach them like, man, I don't really care. I don't really care, but I know this. Drop this bomb right here. I don't really care. I like this, just any little spectrum, which I also found was interesting because I'd been doing this type of research where I'll get into this little tit for tat methodology in a little bit here. But Kev having the NSA training, having to travel the world, it was like he learned to put on, to blend in, and that's having to play a little bit different role, So he also had this like experience where he's interacting with people and where he's playing just a little bit different role, and I'm like, well, hey man, this is about what I experienced. Like, what do you have to say about this and all your statistic experience around the world? And he was like, this is what I was taught, 80-20 rule. I'm like, jeez, whoever thought of that knows what they're fucking talking about, because that's almost exactly what I experienced. It's like, I was like, holy shit, man. So when I heard that, I was just like, all right, no, that's about exactly what I experienced. Like 20% of the time, the people are going to be interested enough to actually read the book or actually go and listen to a podcast, whichever it may be. For whatever reason, I don't know what it is, too. It's something about human behavior and how they are driven to actually do things. And so then one thing I asked Kev, I was like, well, how about the idea of what actually makes people go and do something like reading a book or listening to a podcast, especially something like ours, where it's not built like, hey, we're just going to jump out, start entertaining you right away. It's like, no, we're here to think. What is it that would actually drive somebody to do that, right? My contention is that it's intellectual interests that actually makes the person go and do it, rather than the person's experience with the messenger and how they presented the information. Now, that's going to make some of you think, and you're automatically going to start having some thoughts and be like, well, I wouldn't, go buy a car if the salesman wasn't nice. And it's like, if you wanted that specific car, yes, you would. You would either deal with the salesman being a dick, or you would find a different salesman at the same place who was going to treat you the same way. But either way, you're going to buy that car because that's the one you want for whatever reason it is. It's not because the person presenting you the information about the car was a cool cat. You know what I'm saying? It's not... Like, my experience has been that it really almost doesn't matter. You can just kind of present the information almost as it comes to you, like on the fly. Because if you have a certain like schema, well, let me ask you all this: like, walk yourself through the path of having to market some sort of product, like a book. How are you going to get people to actually go and read it? Is it going to be because you have this fancy suave marketing scheme that you're just a smooth talking Sammy, so everybody just listens to you, and you're such a nice smooth guy that everybody liked you, and now they're going to go read the book? I'm telling you, that doesn't actually work. The book has to be intellectually worth their time, because they're not going to go waste their time reading something just because you were nice to them. Now, there are the scenarios where it will start them reading it, like, oh, that person was really nice. Like, I might not be super interested in the book, but I'll go like check it out because they were nice. That does happen. But I still think that it's more based on the fact that like people are driven to actually do something based on intellectual interest. If they're not truly intellectually interested, it doesn't necessarily really matter how nice you are to them or how well you connected with them. They're still just not going to do it. So I want you all to think about that. And then while you're thinking about that, apply this 80-20 thing on top of that. I think it's very fun to think about for me, because it's like, at some point, well, then let me ask y'all this at this point, let's say you've gone out there and read the book. Like, how would you market it? Would you market it? Let's say that you've listened to some of our Big Brain University stuff or anything that we've done. How would you market it? Would you market it? Or would you just create the content, post it, and see what happens? Let people come as they come. It's just an interesting thought experiment. I don't think there's necessarily an exactly right or wrong answer, but it just starts the question of things. And one thing that I want you all to be aware of, we present this information in the way that it's like, kind of like the book is actually. The things in the book were like, I'm not trying to force anything. I'm just telling you about the experiences, the important information there for you. And that's what we've been doing here. We're not really trying to impress ourselves on you and be like, man, Kevin and we got it figured out. Like, we are cool motherfuckers. Like, you should all be thinking like we are, because then you would be as cool as we are. It's just it's not really like that. It's more like we're just trying to add some perspective, so because we can see that a lot of the 80% is missing it, and for the 20%. We do it for, okay, well, if you guys are aware of it, then cool, you're aware of it. Then now you also know that we're aware of it, so we're thinking the same way. And also, if maybe you're not aware of that perspective, because even the 20% doesn't all think exactly the same. This is why I always say collaboration solves collective problems, because what Kev sees, I don't see. What I see, Kev doesn't see. Sometimes it is the same and sometimes it's not, but we're both going to have a unique ability to provide insight after processing information. So interesting stuff to think about there. Let's see here. The tit for tat methodology. Let's the self-reflective tit for tat methodology. Let's touch on that while I'm yapping here. So while I'm cooking here, the self-reflective tit for tat methodology. There's a tit for tat methodology. Kev is gonna be able to speak to the 2 question 1 answer methodology, but let me cook on this for a bit. Over the years, I've, when I'm talking to people, it's you kind of go back and forth. You're, hey, how's it going? Blah, 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 this and that. Whatever subject you may be talking about. Was it flat earth or veganism or concave earth or globe earth or fucking nutrition or, pick a subject. A lot of times you'd run into people and, maybe you wouldn't see eye to eye. Maybe you would. What I found, to cut this short, let's cut to the chase here. What I found was if you just, sort of reflect that person's own behavior, not just like repeating what they say, right? And not just like rephrasing what they say as a question, but just like you can disagree and debate and stuff, but you never really raise the personal level. Like you never really go to a level where you're attacking them or anything unless they do. Like if they come to attack you a little bit, like you can attack at the same level back. Like you might be able to amp up a little bit, but you always do it in a manner that like really more reflects their behavior more than how you actually feel. Because you have to remember to just detach yourself from the situation and the whole thing. Like this is taught in Eastern philosophies and Eastern debate styles, where you can go to the debate grounds and you can be a bully. That's where you can go be a bully about information. Like, fuck you, buddy. You don't know a goddamn thing. I'm a shit down your neck type of thing. And I'm going to rub your intellectual shit in the dirt. You're going to be a fucking disgrace after I'm done with you. Like, you can try to psych them out and shit, right? But then you present the information. You get to go back and forth. And all the whole time, like, the whole idea is that you're testing that person's attachment to aggression and wanting to defend their ego. That's what it's really a test of. And like, because once you can get past that part of their ego, you know that like, okay, like their ego is just, it's gone. Like you're not going to be able to draw it out. You're not going to be able to piss them off. Like then you can really get to debating a subject. You can get to a learning experience, a collaborative learning experience, where like I was saying, you both can add perspective and insight. So you can get to a place of real wisdom and problem solving. Versus the typical debate style we see today, where it's like, oh, what do you believe? Oh, that? Oh, you said that on the screen? Look, oh my God, he said that. He must believe this. It's so assumption-based and so based on this ego-centric, just garbage way of thinking. It's like this slave mentality way of thinking. I say slave, but it's this it's the cog mentality, the cognition level of CogNation, if you will. So what I've found on this tit for tat methodology, like this, you kind of self-reflect them, right? if you'll notice that a lot of them don't even like themselves, like the way that they're acting. So it's like, well, shit, that's kind of interesting, you know? Like, even how would you ever even connect with that person? They're not, you know, that's part of that 80% where it's like you're not going to connect with them anyway, type of thing. So it's just something to think about. But again, this tit for tat methodology, I read somewhere, and I wish that I could remember exactly what it was, but it was dealing with comparing both debate styles and like forensic investigation type of thing, where it was a supercomputer was testing the different methodologies, like which one was the most effective. And I think it was tied in with scientific process as well. The tit for tat methodology won. And I remember that sticking in my mind, because I was like, man, that's actually like sort of what I experience when I'm talking to some of these people. It gets going in a tit for tat way, and it's like, because I've been testing like the karma of it. Like, if I call somebody a retard, do I get like devalued in my karma type of thing? Like, do I suffer for that? Is that like considered being a bad person type of thing? So I've tested this, and what I find is like, no, not if you're not just out there like slinging insults at people to get a raise out of them. That's not what it is. It's only when it kind of comes up, like they surface it themselves and they project themselves onto you, and then you just kind of reflect that. And I understand, like, I'm giving people some ideas here, because a lot of people like to do is they think like, oh, I've experienced that, I know everything about it now, or I heard this guy say that and sounded like he was smart, and he's working with this guy named Kevin and he's smart, so since I know them and I knew about what he was saying, I related with it, and therefore I am an expert on this as well, and I can now employ this as a tool. It's like, I've seen that actually happen, and it's sometimes not healthy. So you guys, like Kev was kind of saying, you got to take some things with some caution. Like, you can't just think that you know exactly what I'm talking about just because you kind of I just wanted a note on that. So don't run out there and think that start throwing stones at people and just be like, well, I heard him talking about this tit for tat methodology. If I just reflect your behavior, it's like, listen, there's a bit of a tastefulness to it that you need to maintain. And, you know, I understand that my palate of flavor is going to taste different than everybody else's, but that's, you know, a level of our own unique experience. But what I'm referring to is that there is some karma to the situation where it's like you can get a little bit out of hand and off track. And the point of things is you don't want to be necessarily misleading people or manipulating people or triggering people just to like study their behavior. You just kind of let situations happen naturally and learn from the behavior. It's not really a point of like manipulation. Well, okay, I got him going now, let's tit for tat. It's like, no, just, you also have to really be like ready to just let it die, like, or not let it die, but just you have to be willing to also come back to a baseline of connection and agreement, and then willing to move forward from there too. So the person will usually always give you that indication, and you can always kind of try to steer back to that point as well. For example, today somebody was like trying to say I was being hypocritical, but it was like, well, no, not really. But you could kind of see their argument why they were trying to say that. And then the guy was like, well, and I was like, well, you know, it's really not. It's just kind of just think on a different level here, and you wouldn't have taken it that way in the first place. And he was like, well, I'll agree to up my level if you would agree to self-improve as well. And I was like, hey, that's a fair enough deal, because I'm going to keep self-improving anyway. So I'm glad you saw it my way, buddy, because that's the direction I was going with it anyway. Because my foundation is just it's a bit of a more learning-based foundation. I don't want to talk too long here on my on just to hear me talk, but I wanted to note on top of this for everybody, add in the value now of like in-person conversation versus digital, because there's an absolute difference between the two. Like Kevin and I plan on doing some marketing locally when the time is right. And that interaction is going to be totally different than just some self-reflective thing, and that's only sometimes, if somebody's trying to debate or something like that. I find that if you're debating somebody, you can tit for tat them and basically just let themselves disprove themselves. It's a way of sort of letting them debunk themselves. Just a little side note for you, a little tip. Little tip on the tit for tat. So yeah, just know that it's a different experience, in person versus digital. But go ahead and did you want to talk at all on the 2 questions, 1 answer bit? Oh, that thing's way better.
2 questions, 1 answer. It's a unique way to get information, pull secrets. Use it. See, let's get this manipulation thing out of the way.
Those are very interesting
manipulation.
Things you just said. Can you repeat what you just said? Because I want everybody to listen to that again. Because what he just said, most people just might kind of listen to it and let him move on and talk. But really think about what he just said there. Because what he just said there was like, wait a minute, what did you just say to me? You said that you were just trained on how to do what and pull information out of me?
No, 2 questions.
One thing I've always known about Kev here, people, is this guy was like trained in the art of conversation at some point. I'm sorry, I prefaced that a little long. I didn't always know it, but it was like right away I was just like, this guy is just really good at it. Like the timing is so, like I wish y'all could have been in my shoes for that one. That's a really fun one to think back on. But sorry to interrupt. Carry on. Yeah. Just pay attention, people. Like he's talking about some really interesting things here.
2 questions, 1 answer. A lot of people in conversation, especially when you're meeting somebody, and 2 questions, 1 answer. That's it. It goes 2 questions, 1 answer. 2 questions, 1 answer. And then it'll start going down other answers, and then other answers, and then it becomes, and then when the questions come back, there are no answers. So what do? Man, I ain't got time to talk about it. You already told me everything that I needed to know, and then you can perform a baseline on reading people, getting to know information. But the key thing is manipulation. You were talking about manipulation earlier, about how people shouldn't use manipulation. Well, I say the only way to find out things or to try to get people, you have to use manipulation. Here's why. In an interrogation, if somebody's sitting in the hot seat, it's like 2 questions, 1 answer. And then you have to use manipulation behavior to get that person to think differently. They'll become more open with you. They'll talk more. They'll give you more information. Depending on the situation, it could be anything from job interview. It could be any daily life. This isn't just some sort of like only using interrogations. This is
can be applied kind of everywhere, universal.
Absolutely. Manipulation, like an interrogation. In order to get a criminal to admit to be on a polygraph, you have to use the manipulation, read technique. A lot of people use a lot of criticism against the legality of how communication is done. But I'm going to tell you, in human intelligence, interpersonal conversations, that's why I never use digital for it's the human.
Yeah, the human's value, the person, the face-to-face value.
And the 2 questions, 1 answer is just a platform whether you after two questions. You know how that there's like this game, and you could ask it 20 questions, and by the end of these 20 questions, it would tell you, oh, you're thinking of a fish, because it would ask you in the beginning, are you thinking of a house? And then it has to ask you all these questions. So it'd say, is it a square object? And you say, yes. And then it goes now into another. And it finally gets to the answer by about question 7. It comes down to like, I formulated, and based off of the algorithms, this is what you were thinking of based off of my questions. But you can't go down that route because that's too many questions.
Yeah.
So 2 questions, 1 answer. Effective even people do job interviews. If you can ask 2 questions back to now here's the thing: who has control in a conversation when they're talking? Not in a public. They're just in a.
Yeah.
Who has control of a conversation?
The person who's asking the question.
Bam. A lot of people think it's the person that talks the most, the person that, and the talk show host only asked 3 questions, but the person was not in control, because the person asking questions can also
they're setting a premise. Yeah.
And that's
they're setting
where,
goalposts.
But a lot of people think
Right.
that
And
it's the opposite.
That's why politicians, their whole shtick is, well, I hear what you say, but I'm just not even going to answer your question. And then people are like, well, that guy's a lying, sneaky bastard because that person asked a question and then that person didn't really answer it. So they'll also try to assume something because the person didn't ask the question. So you present a really interesting point there, because just because somebody asked a question, sometimes you can really put people in a situation where it's like people are going to start assuming things just because you're asking them a certain question when you might not even might not even care about the answer. You're just trying to paint a certain perception of them. So I've seen people do it. I've been subject to it myself, where people just try to make assumptions about what I'm doing and my beliefs and this and that. It's an interesting situation, but it is what it is. So I thought that was interesting, where it was like, once again, the kind of methodology that I sort of found was like, man, this seems to work like karmically. Like, there's synchronicity, there's resonance here. It seems like this is the correct tactic to be debating in. Like, I'm never getting too personal or argumentative, never taking it too far type of thing. Like, it's almost like I sort of know the boundaries of it. So I thought it was very interesting connection. So I'm going to keep rolling with it, see what happens as usual. We got to this point in the discussion where it was like, you had this metaphor that you went into when we were talking about, I was like, okay, so let's imagine that 20% of people is our target audience because of the 80-20 rule. We can go out there, we can say everything right, satisfy every possible person's intellectual interest enough to where they go and are presented with the information. They're like, I'm going to go do that someday. We figure about 20% of them will actually do it. So then we were like, well, okay, that doesn't mean that the story's over. How do we go back through this 80% and remarket to them, try to get them to engage with it again? And because we're like, well, we don't really want to manipulate. Like, we want to be as unmanipulative as possible. Like, you could argue that our method of manipulation is by not using manipulation. Whoa. Mm-hmm. The big braininess of that, right? Just like humbleness and honesty, like, It's always a fucking agenda, Kev. Like, see how you can't win no matter what. But what he said was interesting. How would we go about doing it? How would we present a marketing scheme, manipulate it up so that the 80% would want it? And he's like, well, you'd approach it like selling or kids selling chocolate. And just think about that for a minute. Kids selling chocolate.
Yeah.
What's their target audience? What's their marketing schema? How do the Girl Scout cookies get sold each year? How do those little gourmet chocolate bars that the girls' basketball team or whatever it is, cross country team sells for fundraising? How do those get sold? When they go door to door, what's their marketing strategies? You know what I mean? He brought up something where it was like they use emotionally manipulative tactics in that situation. Like, I'm a young kid trying to raise money. It's not really about the fact that you want the chocolate, but you're going to buy it anyway because look at me. I'm here standing out, trying to get out there and present myself to the world, and you want to be supportive of that, right? Ooh, the deviousness of the chocolate selling. Ooh, there's a Count Dracula on the television, so I suppose this is a good time as any to connect it to when he's telling me that story. I was like, oh my fucking God, like he's talking about how religion sells itself. They sell it like they're selling chocolate to kids. That's how they sell religion. They child brain you into it. I remember as a kid, we were talking about this just a bit earlier, how it came up. Kev said something. We were talking about the Reverend Kyle. And Kev was like, okay, so I flip open the Bible, I'm reading it, going straight to the end, reading Revelations. I was like, holy fuck, hold up, dude. I just had this flashback where like I was a young kid. I was sitting in church, and I remember the very moment I was like, okay, these guys, I keep coming here every Sunday, and these guys keep doing this lesson. Like, I keep learning this stuff in the Bible school and all the stuff that the kids do, going to Wednesday Bible camp and confirmation and this and that. So I'm learning, and I'm getting to the age where like I start to really become intellectually interested and curious about things. So I was like, all right, no, I'm on a level where I can read and I can write and I can understand what these adults are talking about. I'm going to read this book and figure out how come we're sitting back here talking about John fucking 900 weeks in a row or whatever it is, and we're never like really getting anywhere with like, what are we talking about here? What is this damn book about? So I'm sitting down, I'm reading it, and the whole thing, you kind of keep like getting this impression like it's all about the end times. Everybody's talking about all the end times. So it's like I found myself. I remember the very moment I'm sitting in church one day. I'm like, I'm reading along with everybody. I'm like, okay, I'm just flipping to the end here. Here we go. Revelations. What's going on in the future, right? What are we all preparing for? And I'm sitting there reading it, and I don't remember if it was one single day that I read it all in. Probably not, but it might have been multiple Sundays that I was doing the same thing where I would just go and start reading Revelations where I left off. And I remember Kev brought me back to that point when he said that, where I was like, I remember sitting there, I'm reading Revelations, and some of the shit in there was like, I'm looking around at the people's faces, like as I'm reading it, having these thoughts go through my head, like I'm processing that information. I'm like, this is what we're fucking, like this is what team I'm on, this is what we're fighting for? This is what we're hoping's gonna happen? I'm like, this is fucking fucked. Like, what? Like, what are we doing to stop this type of thing? And like, this whole book just says like, no, we're fucked, and that's how it's gonna be, and if you believe in this, you're like gonna float up to heaven? Like, what the fuck? And it's more deep than that, blah blah blah. But like, dude, imagine reading this stuff as a little kid. Like, you don't have a large database of information and experience to draw upon to be like to weigh against this information that you're talking to not to weigh against it, but even relate to, like, to help you understand. And so you're in this spot where it's like, holy shit, all these people are here, like, you know, this is the most holiest thing we can be doing with our time right now. It's so super important, but like, this is the world, this is the future that we're all like growing towards, because this isn't the picture that you're all painting for me while I'm going to school and stuff. You're all telling me it's gonna be fucking okay, like, just go to school, go do what the stuff says and get a job and everything's gonna be fine. But what you're telling me here is everything's not gonna be fine. Like, we need to be preparing for hell on earth and to be like defending ourselves from fucking demons and shit running around, like running a place amok and setting fire to like people's houses and shit. That's what you're telling me that we need to be doing. That's what this book is saying. And this is like, I don't have like a fortress to keep people, like, it made society it made society look so stupid. I was like, something's off here. Like, either society's completely wrong or this Bible thing is like, oh, I started having like some kind of just I don't know here about what y'all are thinking about this, but it certainly didn't make me feel very good when I was a little kid. But sorry to segue on that, but it made me just the kids selling chocolate reminded me, like, religion is just like it's selling chocolate to kids. It's selling religion to kids. And to tie those two things together, I have here that both of those things, kids selling chocolate and religion, it suppresses your expression of like your individual thought. Because when the little Girl Scout kid comes to the door and is selling you chocolates, you're gonna go against your better self, your higher self, of saying, man, those cookies are straight poison. You shouldn't be selling them to anybody. Like, I'll give you some money for your cause, but I don't want any of that chocolate. You know? That girl's gonna be like, what? Mommy, this guy said this, and their whole life is gonna, like, you want to cause that paradigm shift when that little girl comes to your door? So it's a decent question. That's a decent topic of debate out there. Like, do you crush her heart at that moment by telling her the truth? And then religion is kind of the same way. It's and this isn't in all cases, but it sort of does suppress your individual thought, because it kind of like provides this blanket where it's like, well, we all believe in Jesus and this and that, but then you're all like, well, no, I believe in this part of the religion, and we get to sort of make it up how we translate it and, you know, how we think the metaphor goes. And at that point, it's like, well, wait a minute. So you're telling me that all the text is just kind of up for your own translation, and that's it? Like that, you know? Then you're kind of like, well, that doesn't sound like you need a unifying platform like Jesus. Like, it just sounds like you're just more talking about being cool with each other and like chilling out and hopefully leading, you know, this place leading us to a cool afterlife, like a place like heaven or whatever it might be. But the whole part about Jesus is like, oh, holy shit, what are we really talking about here? So in a way, it kind of suppresses your individual thought, because so many of them are actually kind of afraid to tell people what they believe about it, because they're afraid they're going to be attacked for their belief. And I've talked about this several times, where it's like, hey man, I'm telling you, a belief is nothing more than a personal attachment, an egotistical attachment. In which case, makes a target out of you and the belief system. Or just the belief itself. It doesn't have to be a belief system. So, I don't want to get going on that part again, but I also saw a. That's what I had to say on that. I'll keep going. I saw an interesting picture where it had two bottles, a bottle within a bottle, and on the inside bottle was the word religion, and then around that was another bottle, where inside that bottle it said spirituality, and then outside the bottle it said consciousness, which enters us into the I'm gonna leave that there. This gets us kind of close to the Christ consciousness conversation, but I want to add some more things here. Maybe I don't have to add so much of this. Maybe I'll bring it in as quick as I possible, because I just have some other notes here where it was like the Ford car slogan was nice, ask around, where it's like, hey, it sounds like something that they're using the 80-20 methodology on, where it's just like, hey, we're just gonna be nice. Well, if you want a car here, hey, we're going to be nice. We figure, hey, you like the car, you don't. There's a 20% chance that you do, 20% or 80% chance that you don't. So there's really like a 20% chance we're going to get the sale. If we put our baseline as, we're just going to be nice, you can expect us to be kind of nice. Which, I guess that's a pretty good methodology if you're trying to sell something like a car. I have something written here where like a lot of the non-car. Well, let's kind of ignore that again too, because let's actually get into the Christ consciousness thing, because that's where the conversation went here.
Well, I'm going to tell you before.
Go for it.
That is, y'all living in this beautiful circus show in America. You guys have the freedoms to express everything without repercussion, in a sense, like the freedoms. The United States of America is the only country where the citizen has the individualism right for all these things that you have no right outside of the United States, citizens of other country, to do any of that. So that's where the division is so adamant that think about that one, because in the United States, absolutely, but it also creates chaos. That's why other countries, they tried to allow people to live like we do in America, and it would never work. It was a complete failed attempt, just like if we decided to go whatever, like certain things that another country does, it would just completely like fail. So that's where I have that perspective lens where I've seen, and it's like, man,
yeah, we gotta come together a bit.
That whole
in
like
you
would be murdered for like expressing LGBT and wherever.
Right.
That's one example. There are hundreds of other things you can add up. Freedom of speech, freedom, all this stuff.
Yeah.
We are monitored and flagged, blocked in certain things where, well, they took that away. But to actually do it, express, that's the thing where that's where there's no other country could relate. They'd be like, yeah, y'all in America are like, that's their perception, bro. They're like, y'all have a war in your own country. How are you guys going to defend your own country when you have such a war in the middle of it? Yeah. And I said I never really thought about it that way. And this was, years ago. And they always just said that you guys have so much freedom, but you guys act so like entitled to just like, everybody's right, nobody's wrong.
Right, live and let live. Don't question their beliefs.
In South Korea, you'd be arrested as a citizen. China, you'd be arrested. In China, you have to, if you say something bad in public and somebody hears it, they just immediately like report you, and you get like a report card at the end of the year that says, hey, you got a B-. And by the way, you can't imagine in America, like if you got like graded
Oh,
on.
if people were like, "Oh, I can judge you,
But see,
buddy. I can mark you up."
that's the
Oh
problem.
God, we'd have the most vindictive
That's
little
the difference. See,
because people are bad for that, dude.
that's
why we're saying here we need an evolution of consciousness where we can come together amidst this state of freedom / chaos and have some a similar way of thinking, at least, where it suspends all of our beliefs, right? Where it's like, hey, it leaves ourselves out of the situation so we can just assess the data, the situation, like the problem, right? It's a non-biased way of looking at it, like detach the self. On the note of detaching the self was one thing I wrote about that was very key in the book, and the experience that I had, like these, if you want to say, like, let's talk about the Christ consciousness thing. Like, one thing that Christ consciousness you'll find in some definitions is that people who report reaching this, or what they describe about this Christ consciousness, is that people will experience like talking to God, like having spiritual experiences where it's like God's manifesting in a way where it's like God's talking to you type of deal. Other sorts of, receiving signs, things like that. The book I wrote has experiences on this level, and it's one of the things I was talking about with the Rev, where it's like, okay, man, these are the things we're experiencing. These are the words that have been used to describe it. But then why am I not on board with this whole idea of Jesus thing? Why didn't I use the word Jesus in the book? And I think it's a very interesting point. To add a little bit more about the Christ consciousness thing, summarizing what I've heard and what I've read is from different kind of places, I kind of keep hearing the same pattern. That Christ consciousness is describing the levels of consciousness. They're 12, like into 12 different levels, right? So different levels of consciousness is what we're dealing with. I'm not saying here that there are only 12 levels and blah, 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 blah. I'm just representing what this is talking about. This is the information that is being talked about. When you go and look at the information, this is what they're talking about. It's not that I'm saying this is how it is, okay? I'm not telling you this is what I believe. It's just this is the information about it. I've had some experiences where I would say, look, I've experienced this. I experienced this a lot. So it's saying stuff like there's 12 levels of consciousness. You can read about the levels of consciousness through like Robert Anton Wilson, Prometheus Rising. There are other sources that talk about levels of consciousness as well. And so the 12 levels of consciousness have been referred to the 12 disciples of Jesus, like having this 12 levels of understanding. And then reaching a level of what some would call illumination or enlightenment, Christ consciousness. One of the things around this is what the Illuminati, one of the secrets that they keep, is that they understand how these levels of consciousness work, so therefore they can manipulate the levels of them. Therefore, they can manipulate this society through consciousness manipulation, through simple. It's basically like when you study what the levels of consciousness are, you're like, oh, so like the levels of our instincts and our awareness and stuff like that. So when you're like, oh, well, if they understand that these are the things that they can put out in society and pander to, this is the behavior types that we're going to see in society, because they understand how to manipulate the levels of consciousness to achieve a certain result in behavior. So it's a fascinating idea, and you can read as deep as you want and meditate as deep as you want on it. I don't want to harp on, the book I wrote. Like, it's a real good, like, synopsis and, like, kind of glimpse for y'all if you haven't heard people talk about this before. It provides some pretty solid examples of, like, hey, there's some stuff going on here that, like, I think most people should be capable of getting to a level of achieving themselves and understanding and learning. And that type of information and experience is something that's probably worth sharing. And it's like, when you read the book and see what kind of happened, it was like, well, I'm not speaking for the things that, and the sources, the whatever you want to call them, that showed up in the book, but they certainly seemed to think that it was worth their time and effort to show up at a certain specific time for a certain person, that they were like, this guy has the ability in the future that he's going to be able to take this information, and for whatever reason he's going to be inclined to write a book retelling it so others can have it and whatever. So they were like, okay, we'll take the time to do it. We'll line up, we'll show up, he'll tell them about it, they can take it for what it's worth. So is how this Christ consciousness thing came up again was kind of interesting, because I had this, like Kevin, I talked here, I had this written down prior, and somebody today in chat shows up and just random, like, hey, what's the link for this book? So I get on the link, and they pop into a direct message, and they like ask me, say, hey, thanks for the link, blah blah blah, what do you think about the Bible, and what do you think about Christ consciousness? And I was like, you gotta be shitting me. This random person just comes in today of all days, all in this context, and maybe somebody's like out there talking to each other in the background, and just coming in, and now it's like presenting itself, and now I'm just sort of being tricked with thinking, oh, somebody came in and said this Christ consciousness. Like, don't think that I'm not fucking skeptical, motherfuckers. I see you out there trying to plot and trying to trick me. Like, you don't think I know that these people are going to be trying to out-intellectualize me, to try to one-up me? Like, good fucking luck, boys and girls. I hope you succeed, because then I get to fucking learn something instead of just, like, sitting on top of the mountain, it feels like sometimes. I'm not trying to be egotistical. There's someone sitting next to me, like Kev here, that can, like, bring me to, put me in check, like, pretty goddamn quick with some of his experiences. Like, I just Kev's on a goddamn mountain range of his own over there. It's like we're just shouting across from the mountaintops at each other, like, you look like you got a nice view over there, bro. I kind of like it.
Well, I get the other word. They say grandiose. They're like, Kev, you're so grandiose of yourself. Like, why do you get the grandiosity?
Oh.
Grandiosity. The grandiosity.
Sure.
And they use that word in like it's like an, it's.
Why do you think so big of yourself?
Yeah, like, why do you
think you're so right?
Grandiose.
Why do you seem to say things like you're right and everybody else is wrong? I get that too.
But the other word is, I
don't know.
What you said was egotistical, or whatever it was.
Egotistical, hypocritical.
Yeah, but I get the flagrant word of whatever, and they're like, why don't you believe in that? And I'm like, because I've seen the world from the outside looking in, and it's a pretty horrific place in the land of the barnyard freedom that everybody has. We're just in this like war. It's like a typhoon going on, and they're like, you sound so grandiose.
Yeah,
so,
speaking such big like ideas, I guess. Speaking in big ideas, grandiose. Like, you're always talking about the big picture, and it's like, yeah, we're trying to get you to see a big picture here.
But I'd rather be called egotistical than grandiose.
Oh yeah, I would too.
Those two.
Well, I don't really care, but
well, that's
I
just
hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a strange. It's scary about how the perception people and the words that they use. They pull it from a lens of perception.
It's a very interesting experience to watch people come across information that they haven't necessarily processed before, and then how they'll react to it. Like, will they shoot the messenger? Will they want to? Will they try to challenge you intellectually? And then what does that experience go like? It's a very interesting one. What I can tell you is there's a lot of very interesting people out there to talk to, and I think that there's a lot of really smart people out there that just they haven't been intercepted, but they certainly have the intellectual capabilities to understand. So then it's kind of a matter of, well, how quickly can you kind of bring that person up to speed? Like, can you run them through a certain amount of scenarios where it's like, okay, think about some things these ways, and let's add perspective here on things, and like try to teach you to run scripts by yourself,
It's called in an academy, barnyard, farm, house. One of those. They learn how to all the stuff, the contingency and all that.
Yeah.
But that's not available to just people to sign up.
Right, it's not. Like, you have to come across people like myself and Kev, and then people like myself and Kev have to be willing to take the time to I don't like the word train, but it's sort of, and educates is sort of like because I don't like the whole pedestal thing, but then there is an element of, it's like, well, I mean, some people, when you just don't have as much information and perspective and experience, it just kind of is a matter of learning. And a lot of people are just so prideful, they don't necessarily want to learn from anybody outside of like this academic scenario, that atmosphere that we've been conditioned to believe is the only time we're supposed to be learning, and the only like format we're supposed to be learning, like where there's this authority figure, this expert on the matter. It's like, well, we're kind of you are more of an authority figure, an expert on the matter, but that's kind of beside the point. We're not coming to you all as those things again, but
why would
just wanted to know
it's to the effect of the 80% that are whatever they're thinking, the way they think. But then it's like, if I've been trained and told, forget basically everything, 80% of everything you learned, that was 80% of everything you learned, just forget about. 20% comes down to communication skills, vocabulary, and how you present yourself. That's like the key elements. They're like, in life, we're not here to like figure out what 1 plus, the basics. We're not, that's where people don't get that access to think differently. But when I've been trained in a realm of how things really work around, how the world really works, people would want to know, well, how do you know? Like, how did you figure it out? Well, it's not something that it's like, here you go, this is how. No, it's the time that, and it's still today, the education system will not get you in a position into the 1% of the, understanding of it all. Yeah. But they can relate in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. No, it's when I think about it and reflect on my own interception and the retraining and reassimilation into society, and even
like, why would I use the normal mundane things?
Society.
Coming back in from the outside, looking in, coming back into this country so divided, and I'm like, this is chaos. How am I supposed to adapt to this when everybody's taught everything that they're supposed to be told and go on with life? But then I'm like, what if everybody was we would have so much different way of processing things. And
Well, what's interesting about both when Kevin and I came back and had to reassimilate. So I titled one of the chapters in my book reassimilation. So I'm going to use the same word to describe it, even though it's somewhat different. It's still parallel because the mentalities that we were both dealing with were so completely different compared to how the 80% is thinking. The thing is that I didn't go and have these Christ consciousness type experiences where it was like I'm talking to God and come back into society and go adopt a religion. I didn't do that. Why didn't I do that after having these coming to God experiences? Why didn't you, after having to deal with all the shit that you had to deal with, and now you have the time freedom, no worries? How come you didn't come back and be like, shit, I'm just gonna go kick it down at the church every day. I'll be so intellectually stimulated. I'll finally have time to like pursue all the spiritual shit that I never had time for when I was working. How come you ain't there doing that?
Because forgetting about that got me out of getting killed. Meaning, if I was dying...
Oh, what? You don't want to unlearn a survival skill, Kev? Gee, God,
like,
how selfish of you.
Like,
don't you want to be saved?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. You just said it would get you killed.
Would have got me killed. That's
wait a minute.
The whole
so
religion.
it wasn't a savior?
Not a damn thing. I could. If you was asked for.
Were you talking about the NSA's telling you that?
Nope.
That Jesus is alive.
Just normal day people
but
traveling the world and wearing a cross in a country that they don't realize that you're going to get killed and kidnapped.
So there's no magical power that's going to save you. Oh shit! Not that you know of, huh?
The only way that I would go back...
I'd have thought they had some pill that you could take that would magically save you. The religion aside. Some Superman power pill. Tell us about that shit. How'd you get so smart? What did they give you?
Yeah. To mix the red and the blue together, you get green, right? Is that what it is? Whatever that color is?
You could tell me it was yellow and I'd agree with you, dude. I don't know. I don't know. I think blue and red is yellow. I don't remember. Blue and green? Shoot. Sorry, I don't know my
The only way I would go into some sort of religion, a facade, was if I disappear.
Oh,
I'd go find some place that nobody be looking for me. To disappear away, first of all, no electronics. And then you have to go into the one place where they'd be like, he'd never be part of a church.
Yeah, I know, right?
They'd be looking like, where'd he go?
The things he said in chat about religion, no way he'd be at a church.
But I would be a burden on that no matter what, because I would be like, well, I'm here, but I'm here
robes, motherfucker, lead the congregation.
I'd be the little, like in the Matrix, like I'm in there to infiltrate, and then next thing you know, we're talking about how it's all facade. Y'all are just like trapped in this, and then next thing you know, I'm like this big like new religion.
Yeah.
I don't plan to take that route, but that would be like an example.
Yeah.
I would just be like, you tell me what I need to hear, and I'll just like fit it right in. I don't want to stand out of it. Be like that's what I would do.
Dude, I know.
And then I'd have a that Versace heaven type lifestyle where, I'm going to be the pastor reverend and give me some of that Versace heaven. And, vows are to be spoken. And then I'd be like, well, vows are to be broken. And they'll be like, whoa.
Oh.
And I'll be like,
do you see his own spin on that?
Oh, my gosh.
Man.
He's not one of us. He's a.
And Kev be like, who's coming with me?
It'd be like, hey, it'd be like trying to recruit people from one organization to another. They're like, here he comes, or here she comes. Like, it's like multi-level marketing.
Oh, I was just thinking the same stuff.
And then
wait.
And then try to build a 7-level foundation out of 3 people. And then that's how you build an organization that could be detrimental, powerful, very organized, very sophisticated and very two steps ahead, not one, two.
Sophisticated.
That's the type of but I'm gonna stay in my own matrix because I'm that's a lot of work to do that. Because
it is a lot of work.
I'd have to build a cover of like I'd have to find a location where I'd have to go through. I'd have to find out where nobody knew, like they wouldn't even know where what were you? What?
Right, you go drop in a little commune somewhere that's all religious and shit. They're all over the place.
Because I always thought the Peace Corps would have been a cool operation. Travel around the world.
Oh yeah,
Learn languages.
You can find one there too. For
create
sure.
your own type of whatever.
There's all sorts
but then
of little
you think about it, you do that, and then you come back to America.
Well, people are catching on that it's
how you
fucking
gonna
catchy.
fit-
You just gotta have something for them to believe in.
But how are they
Like
gonna
fucking
come back?
vegans caught on to this shit. No problem. It doesn't matter what religion you are. Like veganism is the religion there. Like they'll go start a veganism commune. It's easy as fuck. So I want you all to take this into example, like Kev's answer there. Now, what did he just tell us? He told us, well, I can go be anything that I wanted to. I could shift into their way of thinking because I can learn the belief system because I understand how to manipulate the levels of consciousness. God, what was I talking about? What was I talking about earlier? Did I say something about levels of consciousness earlier and manipulating them? That's fucking weird. That's odd. Because you hadn't even told me that story. No, I'm just being a little bit sarcastic there, but it just goes to I want to have y'all think about. I can go into these chat rooms and be a Christian and appeal to everybody, but that's kind of like this manipulation thing, and there's the levels of manipulation. Like, well, blah blah blah. We can debate that if you want, but the thing is that takes so much energy to do that it's I feel it's somewhat disingenuous. And you can all disagree with all of this that I'm saying about, like, because you can all take the angle that, well, man, you were the one that had these experiences and Kev was the one that had his experiences, and you two are the only ones who can really tell us these experiences from that we know of. You're the only ones out there doing it in this format. So yeah, you guys better be doing every single little manipulative trick that you can to get it to as many people as possible. Maybe that's what you're all going to try to tell us, because it's going to seem like that. I bet that a lot of people out there are going to be like, well, they're not doing it right. They should be doing it like this, or they could be doing it like this. And it's like, man, but look at the box you're trying to put us in, the pedestal you're trying to put us on, or maybe not the pedestal you're trying to put us on, but at least like the requirements that you're expecting of us. It's like, go do what nobody else is doing and go against the grain, but get everybody to agree with you. It's like, do you realize that, like, the stuff that we're sharing with you is like a coming to God experience and a hardcore experience where it's like, look, everything you guys kind of been taught, like 80% of it at the very least is flat out wrong, and it's not what's going on at all. It's just the system of control, this barnyard system, this CogNation that's just going on. It's just a system of control, guys. There's a bigger picture about all that, but we're not going to get in and talk about all that. So yeah, it's good stuff to think about. I'm not going to sit here and circle around that idea. I think we rounded it off enough for y'all to get the point. Presenting the idea to y'all for your feedback, for your brains to process. So here's just a kind of random question. Kev, obviously I asked you this already, but y'all know the company Boeing. Most of you are going to be like, yeah, obviously the airplane company, the Boeing. And, well, here's just a little exercise on perspective for you. If you think with a 14-year-old boy's brain for more than 5 to 10, 15 seconds on what the sound, the word Boeing reminds you of, you might arrive at something sexual in nature. So, boing. Why did they choose to name the company after something that has a sexual reference? And you guys might be like, well, they didn't name it that like that on purpose. It just happens to be a coinkydink. Is that same coinkydink that the Arby's logo looks like the tip of a circumcised dick? Is it the same coinkydink that the Amazon logo, the little arrow with the thing that looks like a dick? Is it just a coinkydink that it's like on a whole shitload of other stuff? Really? So boing. Now, while you laugh at that or not, or might you think it's like, whoa, where are you going with that? You're supposed to be so blah blah blah. Well, if you did notice that before, then you already had that perspective. You're already kind of clued into like how things aren't really as they seem. There's an underlying meaning. There is occulted truth in the world, and it's all around us. But if you didn't see it, I want to ask you to ask yourself, why didn't you see that before? Why didn't you ever think of the word boeing as like, dude, that's just the word for an erection? Ha 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 ha. Well, why didn't you think about it that way? 14-year-old boy would have.
Sure.
So you as a skeptical adult walking around noticing, you're supposed to be noticing details, paying attention, you're aware of what's going on, right? You're aware of the stuff around you as it is in reality, things as they really are. Just a little bit about perspective and perception again. Like, it didn't mean that you weren't smart because you didn't look at it that way or you didn't notice some of those things that I just said. It just means that you didn't have the perspective. Why? Because maybe nobody told you before, or you weren't you didn't know you were supposed to be trying to pay attention to stuff like that. You didn't know the nature of your enemy type of thing. Know your enemy type of thing. The patterns are there for us all to see what's going on. They've got us in a karmic trap where we're perpetuating this CogNation, this barnyard society, this satanic shit in the world, the rise of the goddamn Antichrist. That's because we're all making it happen. We're making it happen. We're making the choices ourselves to use this technology, to let our kids listen to the music. Like, little things like that. Like, we can go on and on and on, layer for layer for layer on this thing. But that's what we seem to be dealing with here. I'm saying, oh, this is my belief. It's like, no, presenting information again. But we can present information off experience and education and turning that into insight and wisdom to be passed along. Like, we're not asking you to believe in shit. We're asking you to suspend your fucking belief because we don't want to hear it. I don't give a fuck what you believe in. I want to know what you think about things. I want to know what you know. What kind of insight can you provide? If I want to know your beliefs, I'll go read a fucking book. Now, I'm not saying getting people's personal takes on something like the Bible is pointless, and that I don't give a fuck about the person. But it's kind of like just serving as an example where it's like, hey man, like, some of that might just be an attachment that if you just let it go, we can really just get to the next level. But what you'll see is people want to explain it because they want to know that you understand and they want to connect with you. I get that. That's a very human thing to do. It's just difficult sometimes for me because it's like I don't like to connect myself to people anyway. And I don't really like to make a whole lot of friendships where it's like, I'm just a very skeptical person, so it's like I'm kind of very limited personally and all that. But I like to be friendly with people and stuff like that. But as far as man, let's go kick it sometime and fucking get down to brass tacks, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I really got to be able to trust, like, people's thought processes and stuff like that, because otherwise it's kind of like Kev said, you don't really know what you can be dealing with. People can just, like, they can get so triggered so fucking easily by, like, you know, you're making joke about Jesus and they're getting pissed off. It's like, fucking hey, man. Like, you even know what I'm talking about? You even know why I'm making fun of Jesus? And they might not know. They might just think, man, that's just so disrespectful. It's like, dude, I've tested the karma of this one, like, so many times. Like, you ain't getting bad karma by making fun of Jesus. Like, you're going to get bad karma by making fun of people unnecessarily. But, like, cracking jokes about, like, kind of a slave mentality religion that's, you know, basically, like, selling chocolate to kids type of fucking religion. I mean, come on, guys. We got better things to think about. But I'm all down for, like, Christ consciousness type of shit. Like, read the book. I'm not trying to be, like, anti-religious, anti-spiritual, anti any of that, because there's something going on there that we can all experience, and we can use it for a collective tool to learn and shit. Like Kev here, ever since I met him, one of the things he would always mention is like, man, it's like sometimes these little synchronicities pop off, and I'm like, oh, so this guy's talking about instances of synchronicity, huh? He must be paying some sort of attention to something, because that's only people that are paying attention to something like that, like, would talk that way. And Kev would talk that way. He would talk that way on a, like, I'm an intellectually curious person because I'm looking around at the world, seeing some things that are like, man, I was just talking about that, and then in this way, not just like, oh, I just mentioned socks and then it came up a thing. It's like, no, dude, these things are like, you are questioning truth. You are looking for answers. And so when you do that, your subconscious will go out into the world, like almost into the future, and start organizing things so information can be collected and returned to you. It's like yourself coming to meet you, almost, you could put it that way. And you can experience these things, and they're like talking to God almost. You can just put these things in different terms. So,
well, I think, you know, overseas, 76 countries, 6 continents, can't confirm or deny Antarctica. I never really had, like, a lot of those coincidences, the syncrasies. I never really had that come together, because it was just a different, you know, you never had that. It was only in our culture, migrating back into this culture, where I started seeing, oh, okay.
Some patterns started to occur. Things popped up in a way that you were like, something extra is going on here.
Yeah,
and then somehow I trickled into your life.
It was just something, yeah.
And I'm like, yo, oh, Kev's listening. Let me fucking shout at the rooftops. Let me shout across this little valley here at the rooftops or the mountaintop that Kev's sitting on. Yeah, maybe he'll be able to, like,
I never had
resonate some of these experiences that I've had.
Over in all those countries, it was always a different.
Oh, it's so interesting.
But
it makes me real curious what would happen if I traveled. Well, I did travel a bit, and I did experience it over. But my situation was different, because I was intercepted in a way that it clued me into those things. You were intercepted in a way that it clued you into thinking in a certain way, where you served the country in like a collective manner, where it was like I didn't do what you did, and you didn't do what I but we did kind of the same thing in real similar ways. So it's I'm really interested to see where Kev's life's taking. This guy says some of the most prophetic shit I've ever fucking heard in my life, and I literally watched a lot of it come true. So it's like, Kev's like a real fucking interesting guy, where it's like, you just seem to be pulling these goddamn magic rabbits out of this fucking hat sometimes, and it's like, I don't know, man. So this guy, he's real interesting.
He used to be good at picking the sports, so good. Now it's been all manipulated with the corporate gambling.
Yeah.
And Taylor Swift's involved.
Oh man, yeah. We'll get into some of that. So The last little bit I had written down here, we're coming up on just about 2 hours, got about 10 minutes before 2 hour mark here, is the idea of critical mass. And this isn't so much a mystery theory or like this metaphysical secret or a real deep intellectual thing. Like, I mean, we can take it to an deep intellectual level if you want, but the idea of critical mass is simply that, let's say our target audience is the 20% out of out of the 100, and the 80% we won't focus our energies on marketing to them. We're going to focus our energy on getting to this. This is all in theory, right? But we're sharing this with you. Get to the point where we're focusing on reaching all of the 20%, because that's a more achievable goal in a realistic amount of time with the least amount of effort and the least amount of resistance. And it's also the quickest path to something called critical mass, where enough people are exposed to information and thinking in a certain way or in a similar manner that it creates a net effect where the 80%, their subconscious, they have this kind of tickle. Their hair starts to raise on the back of their neck like they're missing out. They start to get this feeling of missing out on something. Like, this 20%'s doing something here that we're all missing out on. Like, you guys got this feeling? You guys got this? It starts to cause a little commotion. It starts to cause a stir. So the barnyard starts to stir. The cogs start to turn. They start to think, and the little hair on the back of their neck starts to be. Their subconscious goes out and tries to gather the information that the hair on their neck is standing up for. And when it starts to come back to them, they start to become aware of what the 20% is doing. So, at this point, you've reached a point of critical mass effect where you've at least started to cause the 80% just to respond to what the 20% is doing by an avenue of how consciousness works. So it's like, it's very interesting. I don't want to get too far deep onto it and delve, but it's something for you all to think about.
The 80-20 rule was also in the poker world. They set out of there's so many people want to be a professional poker player back in the day. It was just like everybody wanted to quit their job and play professional poker. Well, a bunch of people did, and about 20% officially were like, their job was they got sponsored. That was their job. So think about that. And those all critically think beyond the statistics of me at a poker, because I'm good with like certain avenues, but these guys, and that's how they all. But then they're like, hey, 80%'s trying to come over here. We should teach them a few things, and then they get taught a few things, and then and then they're like, whoa, there's something with that's a tribe, group out of think about that, like all that 20% makes up and it's like 1% that's advertised as the poster childs, but while the other 20% are behind her,
right? And so you go can
and
see
you
this
think they're gonna go? You think they're gonna? If I said, hey man, you need to go, like they're not gonna go that way. They're gonna stay because there's no other way to think differently than that.
Yeah. So,
business-wise, maybe different, but not to change like something. And
another good example to show the effect is like something like a fashion trend. Now, a fashion trend isn't necessarily what we're talking about here, but it's just to serve the example for the effect. You see 20% of the people wearing those new Air Jordans. Eventually that 20% becomes 80%, and the 20% becomes the ones that aren't wearing the Jordans anymore. So that shows in this situation where we're talking about the evolution of consciousness, we're not talking about shoes that are going to be replaced. What Kev just said is key, because once you evolve in the level of consciousness, you get trained into a better way of thinking, a higher way of thinking. You're not going to go back.
No,
So
won't.
by making the 20%, getting to the 20% effectively, should eventually start the swing to where that becomes the 80%, and the 20% that is left is the one that is, if they're the ones pushing then even further to, again, like almost like a magnetic, and then you're amping and amping and amping, so the 20% always, like, you're swinging sides, but then you're always amping things up? Or is that 20% just going to be like, okay, well, these are the ones that, like, didn't quite get it, so they're still kind of left behind, they're still trying to evolve? Well, then we have a situation where we're looking at society itself and intelligence at an intelligence level, where we can see collective intelligence, and is it growing over time, or is it stagnating over time? Is it doubling over time, or is it not? One of the things that I've read about that always fascinated me was the idea of intelligence in information, not necessarily intelligence, but along with this is just the idea information doubling. And by that I mean, like, you know, it used to be newspaper was, let's just take that spot for example. It used to be newspapers, so, and books. So the amount of information in the world was limited. Well, then what did they do? They added radio. So the amount of information in the world was exponentially grown, or like double, tripled, whatever, quadrupled, exponentially. Then we added TV and the internet and so on and so forth. So theoretically, when we look back, it's like we should be seeing a result in intelligence gained from the amount of information that is now available.
Well, it's doubling every second.
Yeah. Down to like, okay, well, by the year 2020, whatever, it's information's going to be doubling every fucking second. People are going to be so goddamn smart, they're going to be using AI programs at their will to do their jobs, type of thing. Like, this is where we need to be thinking of evolutionary consciousness. But what's been happening is they understand the levels of consciousness, so they can manipulate us. So the old ways, by manipulating the drip feed of technology, shifting this society to be technology dependent, they can also catch us and manipulate our levels of consciousness, so they can keep us controlled, because they create all this information warfare and spiritual warfare within all this, right? So
Political warfare.
Yeah, like this whole system of illusion here.
They do that very effectively.
Very effective, absolutely.
I was like, if I was going to be effective in that 20% of the poker world, I was like, the biggest thing wasn't like, you know, the bankroll is one thing. Some people like different avenues. I'm like, hey, I got a 2-year plan. Let's fucking do this. But then I got around the 20 percentile. Started asking, you know, I knew who the 20 percentile is in the poker community. When I go to World Series of Poker, I'd be like, I know that's a 20 percenter. I know that's an 80 percenter. He's online, but actually the 20% all had the same thing in common. They're just like, you know, 18 hours a day, you know, 6 days a week, and you got to be sharp, and and it's like learn a language. I got to keep focused, and then it's like, man, that's a lot of like. And I said, I don't have the patience, because I have the patience certain things, but not like that, because that's too much.
It's pretty intense. 18 hours a day.
18 hours a day.
18-hour day grind.
Just grinds. And I said, nah, that's because then you get sponsored, you get all this other like incentives to do that. And I said, nah. But I surrounded myself. So if I wanted to be on a 20 percentile level, I gotta like listen to the 20 percentile. Listen to like what and what not to do. Here's what's worked. Here's what I know. Here's this whatever it is. Whether you're looking for a tribe, a cult, religion seems you flip though 80-20, but that just tells people you got to be around people that are thinking on the level of.
Because you have to be, to really solve problems, you have to be able to connect with them in a way that you can talk about the subjects where it's like, look, man, we can like get down and we can almost be like arguing, but we know that it's never personal type of thing. We're not trying to. I don't need to sit here and explain that. Kev just like kind of hit some nails on some head there, and I kind of want to just let that resonate and marinate. So that's what I'm gonna do. I think I don't have anything else written down. I like talking about this stuff, so I could sit here and kind of nerd out and break it down and analyze it for hours. But I just wanted to kind of put this bit of information into a time capsule that's about 2 hours long here. Cog is the new Sheeple, and this is CogNation. I think that in a nutshell is
That's where we are in this.
what's the right sign off word? Is it boeing? Every time you see one of those planes flying through the air now, it's just like there goes a flying erection.
On the way to Tokyo, Narita. Tomarigato gozaimasu. Itashimashite.
All right, next time, everybody, take care.